Hello, and welcome back to Sifting for Soul. In this vlog, I'm going to take you through peripheral vestibular dysfunction. It's not really related to photography, but explains why I hadn't done much with photography for like a month and a half. In fact, I didn't do much of anything other than fall down, feel like I was going to fall down, and fall down some more. Let's get it. So here's the thing, I've been gone for a while, 30 days or more. I intended to release videos. I actually have a backlog of videos of different places that I've gone, with different techniques that I've used that I want to share with you, and different experiences that have been meaningful and that I wanted to talk through with you and process with you, but I haven't released them yet. So where was I? So there's a literal answer to that question, which is like, I was in Scotland, and I was in Seattle, and I was in New York, and et cetera, but that's not really what you're asking, assuming you actually asked. Where I actually was for the past couple weeks was in an interesting place in my life. I'll tell you the story, and then you'll understand where I was. So about a month and a half ago, I was in DC, and I went to the doctor. I had this like bite on the back of my arm. I think it was a bite. I don't actually know what it was. I thought it was an ingrown hair. And so I took tweezers and tried to extract the hair from behind my arm, which is quite challenging. Couldn't do it, but I did manage to get it infected. Yeah. So I went to the doctor, and I hardly ever go to the doctor. And that is why I will die early, because I am a man, and sometimes men do those sorts of things. So I hardly ever go to the doctor, is my point. So in DC, I go to the doctor, and I'm explaining, like, so when I do go to the doctor, I tend to say, oh yeah, and I have this problem, and oh yeah, and I have that problem, and oh yeah, not uncommon, unfortunately. So one of the things that I mentioned to the doctor was I had been experiencing some of what I described as wobbles. What happened was I would know I wasn't moving, and then I would feel really like I was being shaken or being pulled down, or basically like I was moving, even though I knew I wasn't moving. And I would feel like I was going to fall, even though I knew I wasn't going to fall. And it wasn't happening with any frequency, and I couldn't figure out what the trigger was. And so I am confident that the doctor thought that I was going crazy. And so she looked at me and said, well, you know, this kind of thing can be caused by malnutrition, but you don't look like you struggle there. And I'm like, no, not a problem. And she's like, well, you know, just keep an eye on it, and if it gets worse, let somebody know. All right. And then she looked at my arm and told me to stop picking at it, and gave me some medicine, antibiotics, and sent me on my way. So that was about a month and a half ago. And then about 3 weeks ago, that weekend, I got more of the wobbles. I could, like, and it started getting progressively worse. Like, I would stand up and I would have to grab onto things thinking I was going to fall down. And then as the day progressed, it got worse and worse. And I was like, I gotta go to the doctor. Something is actually wrong, and I need to get looked at. Like, this isn't going away, it's getting worse. So I made an appointment, and the appointment was for like the next day. And then the next day got there, and I had a lot of difficulty getting through work. So my work could be anything from sitting at my desk and banging away on a keyboard on code all day, or in a server room. One of the things that I noticed is we got some new hardware in, and I'm in a server room, and at one point I had to hold onto the wall, because when I would look around, it just felt like the room was spinning and I was getting wobbly, and it was like, it felt like this. And so I found myself holding on to things, and feeling like I've never been drunk, quite honestly. I've never been why? Kind of boring. Anyway, so I imagine that's what it feels like. And then I noticed, like, when I would stand up or when I would sit up from laying, I felt like violently moved around, and I'm like, I'm struggling to get through the day. I don't know what's going on, and I start sort of playing through all the concerns of what could be happening. Anyway, so the night before, I started to fall down, like not just feel like I was falling, but I would actually start falling down, and it felt like a really slow motion fall. So I remember going up to grab something from the top shelf in my closet, and then I felt like the room started spinning, and then I felt like I was falling. And then before I actually fell, I felt like I was already falling for a couple seconds, and then I would start to fall. And it felt like this really slow motion dead weight fall. Like my knees didn't buckle, I just like dead weight fell. And so then, now, as you can imagine, I'm pretty concerned at this point. And so the next day I would get to the doctor, and I'm trying to explain the symptoms to him, and I'm like, listen, you're gonna think I'm crazy, but I assure you I'm not crazy. Like, this is actually I can feel this is actually happening. I'm not making it up. And so I explained the symptoms to him, and he's a very animated doctor. Shout out to Dr. Chong. He's a very animated doctor, but he seems to know what I'm talking about. And he's a neurologist, not a psychiatrist, so I'm a little bit relieved, I guess. Maybe, but that could be, I'm not sure I should be relieved. I should have been relieved, but at least he didn't think I was crazy, or he seemed to know what sort of crazy I was if I was. Anyhow, so he starts asking me pointed questions. He's like, what time of day is it worse? And I'm like, it gets worse as the day goes on. So like by the evening, it's definitely more pronounced. And he's like, yeah. And he's shaking his head. And I'm like, I feel like you know what I'm talking about. And he's like, yep. And I said, okay, good. And so then he's like, okay, I need to examine you. So he puts me on the table. Or first he has me do these things where I have to hold my arms out, and then I have to march. And apparently, I was marching and like going one direction. I didn't know that I was going one direction. And then he said, do you feel like you're moving? Like going one side or other? I was like, I don't think so. He's like, you are. I was like, oh, interesting. And then he had me do, so it felt kind of like a sobriety test looks like on television. I have never been sobriety tested. Anyway, it felt like one of those looks on television. And then, here's the one, the doozy. So he had me lay on the operating table, and I said, I really hope that the sensation happens while I'm here so that you can see it, and then you will be able to identify, oh, you move this direction, which causes the flux capacitor to flux capacitate, and voila. So he has me get on the operating table, or sorry, on the examining table, not the operating table. He has me get on the examining table, and he tells me to lay down, and as I lay down, I'm sort of like in a slight lean as it's raised at the back, and then he grabs my leg, and so I can't show you. He grabs my leg, and then he starts moving my leg back and forth, and this triggered the most violent of the symptoms. I had 3 different symptoms, and each with different effects. But this one is the most violent symptom. What it feels like is being like grabbed, thrown on the ground, and then spun, or like not on the ground, but really thrown like so that you're laying like dangling in the air, I suppose, not really on the ground. And then you were thrown violently spinning off the planet. And so he triggered that symptom by moving my leg back and forth. And it made me shout out and grab him like with force, and to say like, please stop doing that. Like it's happening now. Please stop. And so what happened was like anything touching me or trying to move me would cause like a tremendous sense of panic. And I grabbed him and I was like, please stop doing that. It's happening now. It's happening now. Please stop. And apparently I grabbed him sort of aggressively. I didn't mean to, but if you felt like you were being thrown off the planet, you would hold on for dear life as well. I assure you. And he stopped, and then he said, okay. And And so in his notes, he mentioned that he couldn't complete the exam because of the event that he triggered. And I felt badly, but he knew exactly what it was. So what it is peripheral vestibular dysfunction. Similar to vertigo, I am not a doctor, so I don't fully appreciate the distinction. But in his explanation to me was vertigo is really a symptom, not the ailment. And so for me, it was a balance problem, not purely a vertigo thing. So what he described was happening was that and this sounds like what I would refer to as bullshit. He explained, well, this is what's happening to you. You have 3 organs in your ear that are responsible for your balance, and one of these organs, one or more of these organs, is getting confused, most likely because a floating crystalline body is loose and tricking it into thinking something is happening, an event is happening. And so he said, that's why you notice it with head movement. And we need to get an MRI to just make sure there's nothing else causing these problems because of your family history. And we just want to rule out that anything more significant is causing this. And once we rule that out, then there's a maneuver that we can do that's highly effective in most of these cases. And so this sounds like you're telling me that there's floating crystals in my ear that are making me fall. And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, I'm an engineer, right? Like, I'm a scientist as well, right? Like, you know that, right? And he's like, yeah, yes, it sounds bogus. It's completely legit. Here's the name of it. And look it up. Apley maneuver is the name of the maneuver. Go look it up and do some research, and like you'll see that it's legit. It's not voodoo. I did, and it was one. I asked him one important question: is it going to keep getting worse? Because I'm noted like it's increasing in frequency. It's becoming quite disruptive. Is it going to keep getting worse? To which he said, yes, it's probably going to get much worse. And I said, oh.